welcome to the Villagers
Welcome to the
podcast.
Villagers podcast. Gotcha. Go ahead, my
I
man.
wanted to make you look bad, but you beat me to it.
I know. Welcome to the Villagers podcast. This is Deepak and Sean, two sides of the world, talking about, what are we talking about today? Crazy, man, because this is, how are we going to not get banned from YouTube talking about this?
Which one are we going to talk about? The Power of Nightmares?
Yes. So, okay, have I ever told you the story about my first psychology class in college?
You have, but I think we can refresh the audience's memory.
Okay, just to refresh. I don't want to bore anybody and tell the same story. But I'm the first to admit I was a weird child. I was a jaded teenager. And I was going to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I took my first psychology class. And we go in, and I don't realize that everybody wants to do psychology to help people. I want to do psychology to manipulate people in sales. And I say that when they go around the room, and they all turned on me. They turned on me like a pack of wolves. But I was very honest about what I said. And what I learned there is, well, maybe I don't get to be honest about what I say, which we can roll back to that in a Shakespearean way by the end of the podcast. But I was fascinated with how humans behave. So first off, before we get further into this whole deal, we're talking about a BBC, not a documentary, because it wasn't an honest documentary.
It's like an opinion piece.
Right. And I'm going to tell you why it's not an honest documentary piece. They mention the Habsburgs and they mention Austria, and they fail to mention that the British crown is the Habsburg crown. And how they dogged the Germans and everybody else in there and failed to say that they're still reigning over England. Now, admittedly, it's left over whole other parts of Europe. So that being said, it's a dishonest documentary. It was pretty damn honest about America, though. Woo, that was hard.
Yeah, we are talking about The Century of the Self by Adam Curtis.
Yeah.
I think it was on BBC back in like the early 2010, maybe.
Yeah. Excellent documentary. But failing to realize the connection with the British crown was a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, being a pussy. But I understand it's BBC.
And we have made it at all of 4 minutes before YouTube's going to be like, come on, guys.
Okay, so here's the challenge. We are a consumer society in America. You are in the infancy of a consumer society in India. You and I have talked about the comparatives at least 50 times, at least, between you being in the infancy. So we get immigrants to come to America, no matter what country they come from, especially if they didn't grow up with any means, meaning you didn't have anything. You can come to America, still work your ass off, have a car, and eventually buy a home. That is the American dream. Is it becoming harder to do? Maybe. I don't know. You know, my dad worked 70 hours a week, thought anything of it, because in Ireland, if you wanted to have any, like food, you had to work that hard. And people go, well, but you didn't have a house. And you go, no, you need to inherit a house. That's the property issue in Europe. And I'm assuming in India, it's the same thing. The land is controlled by very few people. And if you're not in that group, how do you get into that group? That's the striving. So when you're amongst the masses, how do you look better than the next guy for mating? And that's the stuff they didn't talk about in there. So they said, oh, you know, we can get women to smoke, you know, because they now would have a weenus. I better say that rather than the other word. Weenus is actually this, not the. But what it's really about is how do you move to the top of the mating pool of the lowest class?
Yeah.
And that was never mentioned because nothing personal against you British folks, but you guys don't really understand the American dilemma. My dad came over, third grade education, worked his ever-loving butt off, and married somebody out of his class range. He did. My mom had a degree. She was a teacher and was working on her master's and was an opera singer and traveled. I mean, how he got her, he must have had some mojo. But she wasn't going to allow her children to grow up at the rate that he thought would be okay.
Okay.
So she set the tone, and he got to move up a whole rung. I mean, a huge rung. And there's nothing wrong with being a farmer from Ireland, but nobody's impressed when you say that. Nobody, because they go, "Oh, wasn't there some famines over there? You guys must not be very good farmers." I mean, literally. So you think of the American dilemma. You grew up in poverty in India, and you come to America, and you're one of the smart ones. You can be rich here, which, as your people have proven, you are the highest per capita income earners in this country. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. So yes, did this guy, Sigmund Freud's nephew, right? Sigmund Freud's nephew.
What was his name? Edward Bernays.
Bernays. And Bernays is a really famous French sauce, just so you know. And I thought, oh God, he must be so well known that the Bernays sauce is named after. No, he was just a schlep. Look, there are tons of great salespeople in America. Henry Ford was a great salesperson, and he was an Irishman, and he was a terrible racist and a horrible human, and he was selling to the Germans and America at the same time. Just a businessman, and he figured out how to make it here. You know, Scotsman ruled the steel industry here. The guy's name, you might have heard of him, Carnegie. Terrible, terrible human being, but he made, by today's standard he'd probably be close to being a trillionaire. So the opportunity here still exists. What is changing in America is my children are not impressed by what they own, where I was all caught up in it. Like they don't seem to care. Like they don't seem to care.
Do you think that is like the maturity of the consumer market, like coming full circle, where now people don't give a shit about belonging?
Well,
possessions, I guess.
Do you want to? The keeping up with the Joneses is the term in America, and that meant if your neighbor got something, you tried to buy it. It's almost looked down on now. So we've admitted that I'm a minimalist. I just don't want to own anything I don't need. I'm tired of taking care of shit. I don't want to clean shit, Yeah. And I didn't put that on my children, because I'm not suffering. Let's make sure we point that out. I'm not suffering. I just don't want extra stuff, because it takes time. So, I look at this next generation that I raised, and look, mine went all through private schools and everything. They had every advantage. Yeah, they just don't care. Kyle does. That's it. Out of 5 kids, my son Kyle. He used to work for Deepak. But the thing is he's the one that still cares. But I'm interested to see in 5 years if he's moved the other way as well. Our dads didn't hang out with us and become friends with us and want to be part of our lives. I'm assuming it was the same with we both had immigrant parents. You know what they were there for? To make us have an easier life, which we both have had. Yeah. We both have had much better education than they had. But my dad was a consumer. He loved buying shit. He'd buy a new car, and he was so impressed with himself for a while for a new car. I have, quite frankly, I bought my first Mercedes when I was like 21. It was a used old beater, but I was just happy I bought it until I had to take care of it and required how much goddamn work one of these cars took. Because American cars didn't require that kind of work. And
can I ask you for a second? Was it like that generation? Because my father, I've rarely ever talked about it. He was the same way, where his absence, for at least in my case, was just made up by buying shit.
Yeah. Well, that's so. I will say, we've never talked about my first wife here. I thought if I bought enough shit, she'd be happy. I had no idea that we were in a business partnership and in a family partnership or any of this other stuff. I watched what my dad did. My mom seemed very happy, but she was just a happy person, much like my wife, just a happy person. So I equated that to that. And I grew up with a lot of people that were like jet rich. Like they just didn't have a little bit of money. They had real money. And they seemed happy. So I thought, oh, I just need to make a lot of money and buy a lot of shit. So I got to do that really young. And I believe we've talked about the shoe shine machine. Have we ever talked about this?
Yeah.
Right. That was my thing, is once I was able to own my own shoe shine machine in my own house. And that's the little brass thing with the handle on it that has the rollers that go. I knew I'd finally made it. You know, when you got enough money to spare that you buy that dumb stuff. But what I found...
Do you think it was more of a growth phase? Because even in like my 20s, when I used to work in financial services, I'm pretty sure that I was like super careful and good in managing like other people's money, but my own was just
not your own.
The most frivolous shit possible.
Right. So you look back on that, and it didn't change when I had kids, because my kids' mom came with her own wealth. So I've lived the whole way up here, you know, and then way up here. And so I'm not cutting anybody down for wanting it.
Yeah.
But what I realized, it was pretty empty promise. And I'm not preaching. I'm not telling anybody else how to live. I just found that, you know, I've always had enough. You know, it's you go back to that documentary or fake documentary and go, do you have what you need, or do you have what you want? So we have to create the want, right? We have to create the want. There's a motivational speaker here, and I'll think of his name in about 2 hours when I'm taking a nap. And he always says, like an old guy with a big wallet and a lot of money, some girl can find something attractive about it. You know, it's the created want that, oh, this guy's okay if he can provide this much for me. And at the end of the day, does a Chanel suit make you feel better if you have a 50-year-old body when it's designed for a twiggy 20-year-old who can't afford it?
Yep. At that time, is your eyesight so bad that you don't read that it's made in Mexico, stitched in China, made in the Philippines?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Hey, man, Lululemon, the one here in Edmond, the store, sells $13 million a year. $13 million.
Oh, wow.
And you know, those are just cheap fabrics. Somebody went over to China on a trip and picked them all out and sent them over and put a cool logo on them. That is not a brand. That's a logo. If somebody else is, and armor, body armor, whatever all of their clothing line, straight out of China. There's nobody's designing any of that.
On one of my Under Armour jackets, because it's a material that was
Under Armour, not body armor. Sorry.
Yeah, one of the jackets I have by them. It basically is a new material that was made through a blend that was never done before. So there's a cancer warning on it. Because they don't know what it might do to your skin.
Wow. That is brutal. That is brutal. Okay, so let's talk about the smoking in America deal. So when I was young, everybody smoked. It was shocking. Yep. My sister got caught smoking on a playground in second grade because, you know, it was a cool thing that she saw all the parents do. So literally the nun caught her smoking on the playground, second grade. And but she's turned out, I think she has a PhD now. She's been an educator, all this other shit. So life worked out for her. The challenge in America is the Tobacco Institute is always looking for somebody else to become addicted. And so once everything became more or less regulated here, they just moved over to the East.
Yeah.
That's
because
all.
If you come to the more east you travel, even like from India, like you would think that tobacco is good for health the way like the countries east of here smoke.
Right. So we had Virginia Slims, which were these extra long cigarettes. And if Freud was right, and it was a weenus thing, you know, you wanted the longer weenus. But what it was is women thumbing themselves at men, you know, I get to do this, whether you like it or not. And if you remember from the thing, they talked about the psychology behind that. The psychology behind most buying, I would still say, is mating. I'm in first line retail. People with no social skills and everything else think if they own enough stuff, they become an attractive mate to a new level of women. Now, what I would do is move this whole thing. Let's move this whole thing forward and look at dating apps, okay? Which you can look at and go, take the data and let's see if Freud was right. 10% of the men, 10% of the men can have any woman they want. They get all the hits. The other 90 got to take what they can get. That's the deal. And so what makes those guys attractive? Is it a je ne sais quoi, the French, I don't know what it is, but he is just beautiful. Or do they look successful? I've got a girl that works here, her named Destiny. And Destiny, likes a 1950s man out of like Mad Men, the movie or the TV show. I mean, a whole like outdated, machismo. So that's what I look at. And even when I watch that whole thing, once I get beyond the Habsburg thing, which I'm still a little stuck on, or I wouldn't have brought it up for the third time.
I know.
I did not know when I was younger, when I opened my first business. I opened a business at 21 years old, folks. And no, I wasn't any good at it. No, I wasn't really successful, but I did it. I didn't realize that elevated me into this whole different realm, and it never seemed to me that I was marriage material because I seemed to make pretty bad decisions on a regular basis. So why would anybody look long-term at that? Truthfully. But the other guys weren't doing anything. At least I was making decisions. Yes, bad decisions, but at least I was making them. So I would argue about half the things that what I do like about that whole deal is the mob mentality, and that guy knew, because we've watched this play out in America. I mean, Donald Trump used this whole spiel, and a whole bunch of stuff that he did was based on that European country that did all the wrong things in WW1, WW2 that we can't mention or will be taken off YouTube. But that's what he did. He went in and got the old white anger. It's not hard to whip up anger and point at somebody and say it's their fault. That's all. That is true. It's that simple. That's all you're doing. You just go, well, it's a Mexican's fault. They're taking all the jobs. And you go, we have 3% unemployment. What job do you want? Because it's available. Go get it.
That's the funny part about the jobs argument. It makes no sense when you look at the actual unemployment numbers.
Hey, dude, if it weren't for Mexicans, I don't know what we would do building-wise, road-wise, anything having to do with construction. They are today's version of the Irish. When we came over, that's the jobs we got. My dad worked for the railroad. He was a tile setter. Did all this. When he realized that in America, your personality makes you more money than hard work, he became a salesman and put 7 of us through private school doing it. So he figured it out, or my mom figured it out for him, which is probably what actually happened. She was definitely the brains behind the operation. But, nobody knew that. That was her job, was to promote it. Go ahead.
Think of how much fruit and vegetables would cost if it wasn't for immigrant labor.
People have no idea. And the funny thing is they did deals where they go, hey, here's a farm and you can go out and pick. You give people work about 2 hours ago. I'm not doing this shit. And they go home. But in America, we have to have an enemy. We have to.
Yeah. I don't think it's an American thing, Sean. I honestly think it's a human trait. So we can band up as a mob against another.
Right. It's the mob mentality again. Right. And then when you're the lone person who stands up and goes, "What, are you kidding me?" Anthony Bourdain had this deal and said, well, if you don't like Mexicans very much, you don't get to eat their food.
Yeah.
You don't like Indians?
Do you remember that bit I told you about where this guy who was talking to this lady asked her to speak one of the South Indian languages that she didn't speak because she was from northern India? That was the joke I was doing on stage, but I told them that, then he shouldn't be allowed to eat any of the good tandoori chicken from up north. Just tell him to stick to our food.
Yeah, just shouldn't be allowed. It's an interesting thing that everybody's trying to hold their place here. And I don't know, I mean, America's changing. So we went from, in my lifetime, 60% whites in America, which if people really understand, that doesn't mean anything, because we have oppressors and oppressees in the white community. It's not that everybody's white and thinks the same. Trust me. My country's been at war with the country next to us for about 1,500 years. So your guys is in Pakistan. You know, you got a religious thing going on there that always heats up, cools down, heats up, cools down. And you guys are same skin tone, probably speak mostly the same language. You know, so grouping people like that's what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, fucking stupid. I didn't say the F word. I said fucking. It's stupid, but I get it. And so now we are 45% or 47. You know, we're in that shrinking range, especially since COVID, because we were the ones not doing the shots, and so instead of inviting this environment in for change, the fear mongering, continues. But fear mongering isn't about getting whites to hate everybody around them. Fear mongering is so you can control the budget and write the checks to your friends. So it's always about the money.
Yeah, it's like a magic trick, right? You get distracted with the premise, the setup to it. Right. Writing a joke for that instance.
It's always about the money. So to get everybody to look, for one, if you look down on the Mexicans, you don't try to give them legal status, even though they've been working here for 20 years. And you see, if you've traveled to France, you see how that's worked out. They brought in all of this Muslim labor. And then kind of like in a very French fashion, I'd be like, no, we did not do anything. They can go home. We are finished with you. No, they were citizens by then. And what really bothers them is in the Muslim community, if you get divorced, the wife basically ends up being a beggar. And so when you're around France, you'll be like, why are all these Muslim women begging? Well, they're single. No other man's supposed to marry him because she's not a widow. She's a divorcee. And it's, and we're following along that. We follow Europe so much, it's scary. We want to think we're the progressive ones, and we're not. I mean, we're just not. My dad came over here because he didn't want to stay in that ridiculous same old system that refused to change and do anything different. And 50 years later, I'm in cheese school in Ireland, and I'm like, oh, you guys could do this and this and this and this. And they go, yes, if you're in America, you can. You do anything different over here, you get cut down.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think it's kind of a situation with most countries where I think it's more about people getting to be themselves as long as they're not around the people who knew them from like generations. Because they try and keep you in your lane. They don't want you swirling too much, making too much noise. Yeah.
Tall poppy. In Australia, if you're the tall poppy and you grow above the other ones, they cut you down. So we have it terribly in our community. And I watch the Indian communities here. And I told you I complimented this girl in the restaurant on something that she did in an Indian family. And her mom looked at her and I went, oh, dear God, I just got her in trouble because she stood out. Which in America, you want to stand out. In your culture, you don't want to stand out. I'm like, I'm so confused. Why are you here?
Yeah, it is incredibly confusing about that. But I think now it's changing where people here also are kind of getting loud. I don't mean it in a rude way. I'm not putting anyone down. It's just that that bravado and that weird little noise is now becoming part of the culture where it's normal to be loud and obnoxious. Like any table that I think is loud and obnoxious, I would see somebody younger than me being like, "Oh, that table looks like they're having so much fun," and I'm thinking, "No, we usually don't go out and fucking ruin everybody else's night."
Yeah, I mean, is that a takeoff of Hollywood film, or is it a takeoff of games? I mean, is that, what's that a takeoff from?
I think it would be a takeoff from Hollywood that flows through our movie industry, which could be Bollywood or any of the regional Hollywood, Mollywood. There are like a lot of them out here, Sean, depending on the language. I think it flows through like the cultural stream, so to speak, and ends up in the population that still adores and worships and deifies the movie stars here.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic to see. So do you guys sell stuff in your movies? Do you do the product placements and everything, which was another part of that scam? And why wouldn't you do it? I mean, they were the influencers of their era. I mean, I don't know how much I would buy into somebody giving me something to do their stuff unless it was a good quality product. I just don't want to be associated with stuff that isn't. So for me, that matters. There's a guy that I actually watch on TikTok named Mr. Global, and he's an oil guy from Oklahoma, but he's brilliant about the oil industry, and he explains it in common terms. And he's pretty dang good at it. But then he was like selling a product on there. I went, dude, you make enough money in the oil business. You don't need to be doing this. Come on, man. So the influences of their day, how many hundreds of thousands of people were killed by tobacco from that guy getting getting women to do it? The goal now is to get women to drink alcohol in America because women drink a lot less than men. So then there's an app now on some social media deal that the alcohol industry has started to help you control your drinking, which I will tell you, if you need to control your drinking, you need to stop drinking. But they're literally the same game. When you were in England, were they selling the fruit juice that was 1% alcohol when you were there and then they got caught?
No. See, the thing was, when growing up, I wasn't allowed to drink any soft drinks till I was almost like...
We didn't have them in our house. Yeah, we just didn't have them. Isn't that funny? I used to fake sick to go over to my aunt's house because she'd give you an ice cold bottle of Coke. Yeah, literally fake sick. Take off school for the day. That's how I ended up owning a pub right there.
Do you think that younger people listening into this podcast, because I was looking at some of our demographics, are looking at us and going like, what is wrong with these two Philistines?
Right. Well, so I think that the thing to look at is they don't realize the gyrations that we've lived through. And it's the same people trying to get you strung out on a different type of heroin. I mean, that's where the money is. Look, if you're going to own a business, you want to sell something that's addictive. That's the only way you get a repeat customer. George Bush, did a speech. Yeah, go ahead.
And also, if your product is killing off your customer base as they keep consuming it, you need to find new ones to replace the old ones that are dropping dead.
Forever replacing it. Forever. So George Bush did this speech, and I still remember it because I was surprised because he was in the oil business, and he talked about Americans being addicted to oil. Not a very popular thing for him to say, but he was absolutely correct. We use 8 million barrels a day. We just keep rotating it one way or another. 8 million barrels has to come through our society every day. And no matter how much we do all of this other green energy, we just can't compete with 8 million barrels a day. And we're used to just cheap stuff. My cousins in Ireland don't waste electricity because it costs too much money. They don't waste petrol because it costs too much money. It cost me $33 for an entire full tank of gas yesterday. That's it.
I think that's the thing, right? Like even like the amount of gas I used to use there is so much more than what I use here. For the sole reason that it just ends up being like in a fuel. I mean, it's so cheap that you don't notice, right? From when we go like camping somewhere where all the generators are running the entire day and night to just keep us comfortable. All that weird shit. Like
it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
a liter. So a liter is what? So a gallon would be 3.3 liters of gas. So a liter would be somewhere around $1.50. So a gallon would be
$4.50, $5 a gallon. Yeah. Dang, that's a shit ton of money over there.
Yeah. Especially when you are, I think that's like the prolific use of motorcycles that now are kind of getting fancier and fancier to all the way where you'll see guys who do regular jobs but on sports bikes, which is like the cross rockets that we talk about there.
Yeah.
Those are fuel guzzling machines.
Yeah. Is that a mating deal, or is that I want to feel good about myself? Because guys are pretty motivated by mating rituals from day one. I would still go back and argue most of that stuff. I did find it interesting on that deal that I didn't know Freud nearly went bankrupt after the war and all the other stuff. That I found pretty interesting. But when I studied him in college, he was weird as shit. Let's be honest. The guy was weird. Was he wrong? No. Was he 100% right? No. But he opened that door. I think so. Consumerism, where you are, I went through like a kind of not a designer phase, but one way or another, that's what you would call it. I bought a bunch of designer shit in my early 20s, but I also made a lot of money. And did I compare it with any of my friends? No, because none of my friends had any of it. And I was never showing it off. I was not a person who I had an old, like, beat up pickup truck with the nicest stereo you've ever seen, just to drive around, so I didn't look like I was showing off. You know what I mean? Yeah. And my dad, I owned some really nice luxury cars, and my dad literally lectured me and said, Craftsman built that car, and you don't respect it enough to own something they made. You got your dog running around there with dog hair all over it and tennis balls and stuff. He goes, well, Craftsman made that. And I at the time didn't even really, I go, but I bought it. And he's like, Dad, you see what's wrong right there? Do you see?
I can so imagine that.
Oh, I'm such an ass. Such an ass. Oh, well, yeah. I know. So so down the line, you look at what they talk about. Selling nicotine has expanded worldwide. It moves to any culture that's moving up. Like the first thing they addict you to is like soda or caffeine. And the second thing they get you with is cigarettes. And then we move on to heroin and cocaine and everything else as you get bigger. I mean, is cocaine a big deal in India or not? Because I would think it was right now.
I'm not really sure how to say this on the podcast.
Right. Okay.
But I'll figure out if I keep it in or edit it out, but it is actually huge. The number of times that I'm out and about somewhere and I keep getting offered it, and I'm like, oh, dude, just leave me alone. I'm fine.
I've been to America, man. That shit's everywhere. It's like sand. Yeah. I mean, it really and truly, it's interesting to talk to you every week and see. I wish we could figure out a metric for how far behind us you guys are on that. And we seem to be going the other way. Like my kids, my kids seem to smoke a lot of weed, but nothing else. And weed is cheaper than cigarettes here now.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
I mean,
that,
it's literally, it's crazy. So I don't know, man. That's nuts. Okay. How are we doing time-wise? Because I'm showing we're probably close.
Yeah, we have just 4 minutes left.
Okay. What do you want to cover in your 4 minutes, my man?
Do you want to tell me what's up with your political?
So I had this big old fight with this lady from Libs of TikTok, which is not on TikTok. It's on Twitter, which Twitter sucks anymore. I don't know if anybody knows that or not. That's whole space is just weird.
You mean formerly Twitter, now known as X?
Right. X, right. Yeah. Yeah. We still just call it Twitter because Elon Musk is a douche. So I would look at that group and say, okay, so this guy's got his own right-hand private army, and they go out and attack people. So they attacked another representative here. neither one of us cared. So it took all the weight out of it. Because Twitter doesn't affect elections. Twitter, you know, if you get a big enough story, somebody in the media will pull it off of Twitter, but regular people just aren't on there, especially anymore. Because it's just a mean space to be mean. It's like every bully from every high school is on Twitter. I guess that would be me too, because I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I see that now. It looks to me like it backfired. And I don't know. I want to see how it plays out. I really do. I want to see how it plays out. But I've got an election actually that I got to start working for here in probably about 6 weeks from now. You know, if I win, I'm the next mayor, which will be fascinating. You know, who would have ever thought? But you know, and I do have a guy running against me who I'm friendly with, and I'm totally fine with him running against me. And if he wins, cool. But usually the incumbent wins 80% of the time, just so you know the actual statistics. But nothing new here. Our governor's still moving towards the white Christian nationalism thing. He gave a speech called the State of the State yesterday or the day before, and made sure he put in the right code words to let everybody know, you know. But we are still an 80% white state. I'm sure you're aware of that, having lived here. That's pretty big amount. So I mean, it probably works if it's an 80% state, but if it's a 50-50 state, it probably doesn't work. But that stuff is alive and well.
Yeah.
Crazy, huh?
That's like every time somebody asks me why I have so few Black friends, I was like, have you checked the demographics of Oklahoma?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it isn't that you do or do not have them. So we just have never had a whole bunch of Black employees here at this restaurant, but I've worked with Black people my entire life in the restaurant business. It isn't that I won't hire them. Nobody shows up, you know, and we're on the other side of town, and they're concerned driving through a specific town here known as DWB, driving while Black, and they'll get pulled over. And so they're just like, no, we'll find something nearer to home. Yeah, it's. I mean, I can't change that stuff in my small amount of time here, but it is a fascinating dynamic. And you know, what I would recommend to the Black community is go, man, you guys got to do business with yourselves and build your own economy. Indians do business with each other. Irish used to do business with each other. Italians do. That's how you build your own economy. And there's got to be a bank built in there somewhere. You take what works for other cultures and do it yourselves. It really does work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, it's how easy does somebody get sucked in on anything? You know, you gotta eventually figure out you're going to do something for your own community. I mean, that's the only way I know. I mean, I'm married to an Italian. We are finding out we're having to do some business stuff in Kansas City, and it's still as weird as it was when I lived there. So I had this Irish guy doing some work for me, and they're like, "No, you got to use these people." Right, their people. Yeah. Welcome to how it works, brother.